Hello, everyone, and welcome to an October conversation. And today we will be taking the time to go into all the wonderful details around cultural transformation. And especially today, we will be discussing about fostering a culture of adaptability in the AI age. My name is Minola Jacques. I will be your co-host for the next hour. We have Jessa taking care of us backstage. And today's conversation, just as our recent series, are brought to you in collaboration with Transcurrent. I would love to hear from any of you in the audience in the comments. Maybe just drop a short note and let us know where you're connecting from. It would definitely help us know that we are up and running and everything is smooth technically. And also we would be traveling a little bit around the world through your locations and notes. Now, we have an amazing lineup of speakers for today. I know they are just waiting patiently backstage to be brought on screen. So let's put an end to that and seeing them popping up. There they are, all ready to go. And thank you so much for taking the time. Okay, we have people coming in from Dallas, from South London. Wonderful. And let's try to make the most out of our time today. Hacking HR hours always seem shorter than regular hours. And what we will do, we will kick off with a first big request of help from the panelists. Unless you are contributing, if you can stay on mute and keep us safe from echo and background noise and other interesting sounds. And let's kick it off with a short round of intro. Now you know the drill. I will pass the e-mic around clockwise as you appear on my screen. And I will ask you to firstly shortly introduce yourselves, and also knowing a little bit about you, because we've shared conversation spaces before, and I'm following all of you on LinkedIn, which, by the way, I encourage everybody in the audience to do, and you can thank me later. I know that each of you bring a different lens into the conversation, so I would love to hear a little bit about you and your background, and what is the lens through which you will enrich our conversations today. And Tracy, such a joy to see you again.
Such a joy to see you. I miss you when you're not moderating. Oh, you're my favorite. So super excited to be here with you, Manola, and with each of you. Looking forward to our conversation. I am the Vice President of Workplace Insights for Steelcase. I'm a senior contributor with Forbes and Fast Company. I've written a couple of books. The most recent is The Secrets to Happiness at Work, and my PhD is in the sociology of work, how it affects us. I have been studying culture forever, since my very first job out of college with my very first boss. And I just think it's the most interesting thing, organizational culture and how it shapes our behaviors, how we shape it. I've been in the roles of HR for many years and have worked with a lot of different clients on culture and the dynamics of culture. And most recently have been deeply researching AI and adaptability and how it will shift our humanity, our contributions, our identities, our organizations. I've been writing and researching on that just in the last, year and a half or so, right, since it's gotten to be big. So I'll bring a little bit of that lens. I'm not an expert. I think we're all learning, but definitely can bring some research and some perspectives to bear in the conversation. So looking forward to it, you all.
Thank you so very much. Alex, it's great to have you in this conversation with us. Welcome.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. Alex Prasis. I'm located in Chicago, Illinois. So my background spans across HR, or design and development, change management, and DEI. My consulting focuses on org design and culture. And then I also, I'm an adjunct professor in a master's IO psychology program. And actually currently talking about some of this stuff, because we're talking about employee selection and competency models and all the things that kind of surround this. So
I don't know if it's just me or we lost Alex there for a few seconds. So let's do like
excited
this.
for that piece of it. And then I also am involved in some associations. So always kind of thinking from that perspective as well. How are we helping people through the change? How are we not just designing to facilitate the change, but also how are we helping people through the change? So those are just some of my lenses I bring.
Wonderful. I just want to let you know, Alex, that for a few seconds we lost audio from you and you froze. So maybe your connection is a little bit unstable, but you came back just in time to fill my heart with a lot of joy hearing change mentioned so enthusiastically so many times. So wonderful having you with us. Susie, it's been quite a while since I saw you.
It has, and it's nice to see you again. So, my name is Susie Lewis. I'm thrilled to be here. I'm based in France, and I am the founder and managing director of Transform for Value, where we help leaders and organizations really bridge the gap constantly between digital and human, and look at how we can practitioner the human systems of organizations and of communities to create more inclusive and collaborative workplaces. So I spent 20 years in a large organization doing exactly that. So my passion is people and humanity and how that fits into business and why it's pivotal to business, particularly in the digital age. And I run a podcast series on that. And I'm also an executive fellow of the Centre for the Future of Organizations, where we do research on this type of thing, business ecosystems, and also the human layer of those business ecosystems. So that's the lens I'm coming from, operationalizing cultural transformation, particularly in the AI age. And yeah, I'm thrilled to be with you all.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sudhir, great to have you with us. And I was so happy when I saw your name on the list.
Yeah, nice to be back and great to be here, Minola. Thank you so much for having me. And it's wonderful to be among this amazing set of panelists and all the people joining from all over the world. Welcome. And I hope it's going to be a great discussion today. I am in San Francisco Bay Area, and I head an organization called ProOrgs, and I call myself business choreographer, essentially making the culture and strategy dance together in harmony. I'm an engineer originally and moved to HR 20 years ago. So that is the lens that I bring to this conversation today, like, the relationship between HR and technology, how I have seen it over last 20 years, and what is different this time, what could be different this time, and how we could actually leverage this golden opportunity that has come our way.
Thank you. And who else to make our panel complete if not Jess? Hi.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Goldberg. I'm the CEO of a company called Distinctly Human, where I go inside companies. I'm a company trainer. I train up leaders and employees on the uniquely human skills that won't be able to be replaced by AI. And my background prior to this is I also teach leadership and communication skills at Columbia University. And I was the VP at an AI robotics company where I was leading the team building the voice and personality of an adorable robot named Moxie. Looked like it came straight out of a Pixar movie. And so I really sat at the intersection of how far can we push AI. I was leading a team of prompt engineers that were pushing the edges of AI, and then also leading the next generation of leaders and communicators. And where are those unique skills that AI will not be able to replace? So I'm really excited to dive into that today, especially on today's topic, cultural transformation, fostering culture and adaptability in the age of AI. It's so important because as with the rise of AI, there becomes unprecedented opportunities and challenges with inside organizations. And I'm really excited to dive into how do we work through those challenges and how do we capitalize on these big opportunities that we have in front of us.
This sounds so wonderful, and it already feels like sunshine on a very gloomy, very rainy day here in Basel, Switzerland. So I am looking forward to spending some time together. Now, before we dive deeper into the topic, I just want to encourage everybody in the audience, just consider this conversation as much yours as it is ours on the screen, and use the comments generously. What we are absolutely fascinated by is to see all the different nuances that our audience brings into the conversation, whether it's geographical, whether it's industry based or generation based, or your own experiences and your own journeys. They are such a wonderful way to share them and just help this community grow and learn from each other. So do drop us comments, opinions, ideas, even questions. We all try to keep an eye on the comments, and we will try to bring them into our conversation. So please be a part of this, and don't shy away from using the chat feature. Now, we've been talking about culture of adaptability over the past years so much more intensely than, let's say, a decade ago. Now, whether justly so or not, it is what it is. But I would be curious, what is different about the requirements and the needs and the opportunities for adaptability in the AI age? And what are some of the big trends that you see out there? But also, I am very curious, what are some of the subtle cues that maybe not all organizations pick on? And you know my move. I don't know why. I always go diagonally with the first question. So, Susie, you will be our pioneer for the day. And the rest of you, you know, unmuting competition is officially open. Just build your own conversation. So, Susie, what do you see out there?
So basically, I see a lot of busy people rushing to do something with AI. And I think that that's a starting point for many organizations and individual leaders is I need to use AI. Partly because it can help me, and partly because we need to do something with AI because everybody's doing something with AI. So we won't retain competitive advantage if we don't. And there's right and wrong in that. So I think it's really around understanding our business problems and then understanding AI enough to understand what AI can bring to that. And then looking at what does that mean for my people? What does that mean for my organization? What does that mean for my culture? I don't often see it being done in that order. So that's what I'm seeing the most is a sort of mix of that. And they've done some of it and not the rest of it, or they've just got their head around AI and it's changed again. Or so, and often I see the trends is they put it in satellite structures of larger organizations, which is great because you can fast track the ways of working and the culture and, you know, get to proofs of values and proof of concept more quickly. But then how do you plug it back in? And if I put a cultural transformation lens on, that's the biggest challenge I see. And I see people dealing with it very differently, but it's sort of a mix of those Lego bricks I gave, one of them, two of them, or all three of them, but not necessarily in an experience journey for the employees or the leaders. So yeah, it brings with it quite a lot of challenges, which is why we're here. But I think, you know, it brings challenges, opportunities, but quite a lot of fear. So that's what I see around AI, and particularly at the top of organizations, I see quite a lot of what I call FOMO. So that, oh, we've got to do something with it. Let's do it quickly. Otherwise, we won't win the race. But, you know, you don't have to use real data and you don't have to do everything straight away. So that's the trends I'm seeing from my lens.
Mm. And what a kickstart into our conversation. I saw a lot of thoughtful nodding, and Tracy jumps right in.
I accepted the Pioneer Challenge.
lots of thoughtful nodding on my part. Love your point, Susie. So makes so much sense, and especially your points about challenges and opportunities and kind of fear. The thing that I think is, Manola, you were asking, like, what's different today? And I think there's a lot, actually. We're facing a global talent shortage with declining birth rates, and that's more acute than it ever has been. That's different. We're seeing challenges with well-being and loneliness and disconnection. And that is different because it's higher. Issues of depression, anxiety, mental health are more higher, greater than they've ever been. Tech is, of course, a huge trend right now, and it's different today because it will affect us in terms of replacing tasks, not necessarily jobs. It will affect all levels of profession. It will affect all sectors of profession. And that is a different dynamic than tech changes than we've seen in the past. So I do think that there are some important differences. And that affects how people come to work. It affects the role of work. It affects the work experience that we're creating. So I think those are really important points that we need to be adaptable to. You also asked about like what's subtle today and what are some of the smaller signals. One thing I think is fascinating is upskilling, and the extent to which micro credentials are trending, the extent to which organizations are increasingly hiring with the anticipation of upskilling people along the way because things are changing so fast, especially in the world of AI and tech. So kind of work becomes school, right? So I think that's a little bit more subtle. And another one that I think is more subtle today is all about leadership, like leaders who need to learn to lead differently, more by objectives, more by outcomes, with our foot on the gas, even though we're fearful, with the need to try and experiment with AI and tech, even though we're not sure and we need to be really careful about security. So I think that shift in leadership is another one that's maybe more subtle, but equally as important. So like really, really interesting, both opportunities and challenges, to use your language, Susie, in terms of moving forward. That's some of what I'm thinking about lately.
Thank you. Well, let's see who wants to jump in next. Sudhir, and then we go Jess. Sudhir.
All right. I'm willing to wait if Jess wants to go first. I think most of it has been said by Susie and Tracy. I would just bring out one key difference that I'm seeing from the previous developments and now. Like technology was always something that was behind the curtains, right? And you had to make efforts to figure it out and learn it and so on. AI is brought it front stage. It's right there on the stage, and like you can actually use technology to know more about it. So now it's not about going behind the scenes and trying to figure out how it works, which essentially fell in the domain of so-called experts, right? So you had to be an engineer or whatever to figure it out. And that created a lot of resistance for the common people who could not really figure out what's happening and therefore were apprehensive. With AI, that has changed, right? So we need to recognize that. The other thing that has changed and will have a huge impact is in the previous times, one had to spend many years to gain the skills and expertise to be able to contribute to a function, right? So if I call myself a marketing expert, I should have had spent at least like 5-7 years learning about the function, attending a few courses and so on. And now a very simple prompt like act as a marketing expert and tell me what this would look like can do that job for me, right? So from just knowing the function or knowing the nitty-gritties of what you do, I think this is pushing us to the edge of creativity, to the edge of excellence beyond just the knowledge that we have acquired in the past. So how do we really bring all of it together to really move forward in leaps and bounds and not just take small steps?
Well, Jess, my heart goes out to you in the hot seat of wrapping this one up.
No, it's great. I got so many good things so far. So, I'm going to build on a lot of things that the panelists have said so far. Susie made some really great points to start us off about how some companies are moving really, really quickly on this. And so you asked the question about, okay, what are the things that we need to be able to be adaptable in this new age? Especially if companies are moving really, really fast. And so the issue here is when companies move really fast, they forget to get their whole team, their whole company, all in their employees on board. And what's going on with employees? Why aren't we getting them on board? If we're trying to make this cultural transformation to get people bought in to using AI so that we can speed up things, increase productivity, but our team isn't getting bought in. They're having resistance, they're pushing back. Why is that happening? The most common reason I see that happens in organizations is that employees are afraid, am I going to lose my job? I don't want to start using AI because I'm going to lose my job. Now, this has been a pattern throughout history. Over and over again, textile workers worried about losing their jobs. When computers first came out, people worried about losing their jobs. Over and over and over again throughout history, people have worried about losing their jobs. And that is a fear. That is something that we need to really address, because some people could end up losing their jobs. And so what I like to think about it is, how many people right now would say that what makes them human, what makes them great at their job is that they can pick berries really well? Anyone? No one. And that's because that's not a skill that we really think is important anymore. So today, what we think is important, maybe we think that writing perfectly grammatical sentences is what makes us great at our marketing job. But in the future, that might not be a skill that's required anymore. And so here's how we address the fear for our employees to get them on board. We do two things. One, which Tracy was talking about, we upskill. We help people get the new skills. So, their skill is not picking berries anymore. Their skill is not, writing perfectly grammatical sentences. Their skill is now prompt engineering. So we upskill them on the new skill that they need. That's number one. Second thing that we do is we redefine roles and responsibilities, so people know what their new responsibilities for this role is. Rather than being afraid that these responsibilities are now all being taken over by AI, they now know what their new responsibilities are, and they've gotten the skills, tools, and training to be able to do that. And that's how you bring people on board. That's how you create a cultural transformation in the age of AI, and you bring everyone along with you, is you give them the skills and tools, and you make them feel safe that their job is going to still remain.
I see that Alex is struggling with the internet, so let's try to go agile, not fragile, and we will bring her in whenever she can join. I was wondering, you all mentioned that AI either fills people with dread or with enthusiasm and a little bit of curiosity in the middle. So I would really, really love to take a bit of time and look at this through the lens of employee engagement. I love those two definitions, that culture is how we do things around here, and engagement is how I feel about how we do things around here. And Tracy, I know that employee engagement is something very near and dear to your heart. So how do you see AI and the growing prominence of AI within the workplace affecting employee engagement? And Jess, gave us the lens of, oh my God, is my job secure from AI? So how do you see employee engagement in the age of AI?
Yeah, it's such a critical point, and I think it harkens back to many of the things that the panelists have talked about already, right? A really important part of engagement is people having clarity about where we're going, having clarity about how they fit, having clarity in terms of their expectations, having leaders in whom they trust, having colleagues and coworkers in whom they trust. And so I absolutely believe that AI, and more importantly than AI itself, how we handle AI will affect engagement. Actually, engagement is at an 11-year low, and the number of people who are disengaged today is a 2-to-1 ratio compared to those who are engaged. But when we can give people a sense of purpose and they understand where they fit in that line of sight, that will be really helpful. So when we're really clear about where we're going and how we anticipate AI being a part of that landscape, and how we anticipate them being a part of that landscape, I think that will make a huge difference. When we can give people the opportunity to still make a lot of choices and have a lot of empowerment in terms of their jobs, I think that will be helpful. One of the things that we know when we're fearful about something, when we can try it, when we can experiment, when we can take small steps, a lot of times that will reduce fear. So when we can give people the opportunity to start to ask questions. You made the point about curiosity. Start to incorporate AI into how they're working with the right guardrails on security, with the right guardrails on clarity and how they might do that. That can also help, because then they can engage more deeply in what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I think the last thing is, there's lots related to engagement, but another really big element of both healthy cultures and engaged people is learning and growth and development. So when we're really clear about what that path will be toward learning, we're really clear about how people will still have a role to play. We're really clear about how we'll support people on an ongoing basis as tasks are changing and as our tools are changing, as roles are changing. I think that can help engagement as well.
I love how our conversation goes back to skilling and upskilling and reskilling. Susie, please.
Upskilling, we've had comments in the chat around the pace of change as well as
we can't hear you properly, Susie. Your audio sounds like you're calling from a submarine, which is okay, but I just want to know that the audio is not coming through very well. No, you're on mute now. Let's give it another go.
Now?
Yes, and it's better.
Okay, super. Thank you. So, upskilling, I'm back from the depths of the ocean, but upskilling, I want to pick up on the upskilling point, because it's not just technological upskilling. It's not just what AI is, what it can do, how you program it. And there's a comment from Sandy in the chat, and also another comment around leadership. And this giving people the emotional toolkit to manage the pace of change and to manage themselves. So you've got two big bricks of change there. You've got me in front of AI that I don't really understand. And then you've got the emotional tools of what it might mean for the way I work, my position, how much I earn, and the rest of, the whole environment. Will I look silly if I don't know what's going on? So I think the upskilling part is really, really, really important for engagement. And also, to come back to something Tracy said, the clarity. So being really clear that AI is there to enable and enhance human decision making. And it can take lots of decisions based on lots and lots of data, which is where it helps us. But I think the enhancement thing is really important in framing for leaders and employees what it means for them. So I think that is an integral part of upskilling for me, but often the emotional layer isn't there, which leads to this overwhelm of, oh my goodness, I don't really understand it. I think I understand the strategy, but I don't really understand how it's going to affect my job, and the stories we tell ourselves. So the upskilling piece always needs to have this emotional human element in it, but it's very often not forgotten, put to one side until we've sorted the tool out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Well, let's change the pattern and go Jess and then Sudhir.
Amazing. Yeah, I'd love to build on exactly what Susie was just saying. So, we need this emotional toolkit that we need to give employees the ability to regulate, to feel calm when there's a lot of change happening, when there's a lot of chaos happening. This is how we build this cultural transformation. But there's also, it's not just individual emotional toolkit, it's a toolkit as an organization. So Google did a study to study what are their best performing teams, the teams that innovated fastest, that were able to drive change meaningfully the fastest. Which ones were that and why? What were the qualities of it? And what they discovered, this was called Project Aristotle, what they discovered was the best performing teams had one quality. It was called psychological safety. This means that as a group, everyone felt safe to say if something was going wrong, if they didn't know how to complete a project, if there was something stuck, if they had a new idea that could innovate things better. They all felt safe to share what was going on for them. And that emotional regulation as a group, that ability to share things, to drive things forward, to be vulnerable, even when things are tough, allows things to drive forward. So if we're talking about cultural transformation, we need individuals to have the toolkit to regulate themselves. And then we need, as a group, to have this big team bonding where they feel connected to each other and they feel safe to reach out for help. They feel safe to raise their hand for a great new idea of how they could use AI. This is what we need in order to drive things forward.
Sudhir,
Yeah, like I was wondering if we should give Alex a chance because she's finally here, So
while she's here, yeah.
I made it. I'm so sorry, everybody. So Manola, I'm so sorry. Can you just reiterate what's the current question that everyone's
Of
talking
course,
through?
of course. So we are now discussing some insights linking employee engagement and AI. What's the dynamic? What's the dynamic there? How do they dance together? Back to Sudhir's dance analogy.
So, something that comes to mind, and actually Susie brought this up in her initial commentary, was, we get so wrapped up in the kind of the trend of AI and the new shiny object, that we're not very clear on what we're using it for, how we're using it. So I think having kind of that North Star is a huge piece of it, right? Like helping employees understand what is the why for this from a design perspective. How does it fit into your roles and responsibilities? And also for the people who, I know Jess had mentioned earlier, that kind of worry about what this means for your job. It's also giving them, just freedom to be able to experiment and do something new with their job. Talking through like, hey, AI is going to help with this, not because we're trying to take things away from your job, but actually because we want to enhance your job. And here are some things you might want to think about, right? So giving them opportunities to be more strategic, giving them opportunities to kind of think about how they can accelerate their leadership skill set. I think is huge. And then, Jess mentioned psychological safety. I think a key component of psychological safety is a growth mindset, which is also very important as you're learning new skills, new technology. But none of that is possible if you don't really define what you're using AI for, what are the parameters around it, what are any kind of concerns about when we use it, how we use it, and also kind of the other side of it, that it is not, kind of the end all be all. Like I remember when I first went to undergrad, right? Like Wikipedia was new. I'm really aging myself here, but Wikipedia was new, and it was like, oh my God, never use Wikipedia, right? Like the college is going to catch you, like you can't, like everyone was kind of like worried about what that means. And like remembering that it's crowdsourced, well, remember like, ChatGPT is crowdsourced too, right? So you do need to make sure that people understand exactly how to use it. And then also that AI is more than ChatGPT. It is, across several different facets of what we do already. Machine learning, natural language processing, all of that has been there for a long time. So it's just kind of pointing out the adjustments, the evolution that's already taken place, and then how that actually benefits all the employees. But with that, making sure that you have the support around their learning to be able to evolve their own roles as it relates to how technology is going to evolve their roles.
Mm.
all right, so that was great, Alex, and it's always difficult to come in last because everything that could be said has already been said. And I go back to what Tracy said. Like we are indeed at a low when it comes to employee engagement, and whether it's 11-year low or 30-year low, but we are at a low. And let's just look at what's been happening around us for the last few years. So we went through pandemic, everybody went remote, and that itself created a huge deficit for engagement. Like, people knew how to engage when they were under one roof, right? Now, suddenly in a distributed situation, that really hit us bad. Then came in the economic issues, and we have been struggling with that over last couple of years with so many layoffs happening and so on, and at times companies not having that clarity in terms of when things would start looking up and when would this rock stem, and that is creating a further trust deficit. In addition to that, now we have this new shiny object, as Alex called it, or just called it. That is creating more anxiety in people and creating more deficit, right? So we already talked about trust. Susie talked about toolkit. Jess talked about psychological safety. All those things are important. But the thing that is required to build that, I think that is going completely missing nowadays. Like, the communication, the listening that needs to happen, and that dialogue that needs to happen has reduced drastically. Maybe it's because of people going remote. It's because even the leadership team is remote nowadays. Like, they are operating from all over the world. And I am seeing, and of course, all of us are seeing, these one-sided notes from the CEOs straight away coming onto the social media saying, hey, like starting Monday, we need to be in office all 5 days, blah, blah, blah. And that entire thing about dialogue is missing. Like, why are we doing it? As Alex pointed out very rightly, that the why behind the what is not clear. We come to decisions in a very non-inclusive manner, right? And at the end of it, AI is going to really explode that entire thing now, because one, it's going to make people worried about their jobs, no doubt. But the other thing is about not able to upskill themselves to the level that AI would push the jobs to. Because a lot of those things that we talk about upskilling and reskilling were still at a very mechanical level, to be honest. But now the upskilling and reskilling will be required from the routine and mundane jobs to creative jobs. And that's a very different kind of upskilling that is required. Because if you look at our schooling system, if you look at everything, it's all about killing creativity, right? And now we have to reverse that process. And that's going to be a tough job for corporates, particularly rest of the world as well. And building employee engagement in this environment is going to be such a challenge.
Well, it's wonderful where we are in this conversation. So it makes it even more painful for me to say that we are already about a handful of minutes into our second half of the conversation. Before we will get those questions in the chat, yes, this conversation is being recorded. So welcome to everybody who joined a little bit later. And you can always go back and enjoy the recording from the same link on LinkedIn a few minutes after we stop the live streaming. And you can enjoy it again or recommend it to colleagues, friends, and people within your circles. Now, Jess, I'm a journalist by trade. I'm a change practitioner by accident, an accident that I keep choosing not to avoid for 2 decades. So you cannot wave communication and leadership in front of me and not expecting it to come back and hit you. So, and also thank you, Sudhir, for opening this avenue to talk about communication. Now you really made my life easier as a facilitator. I love the continuation of a saying that we all know. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. Now, the continuation that I absolutely love is that behaviors eat culture for lunch. I don't know yet what's for dinner, but I will let you know in a future panel. Now, Jess, if we look at cultural transformations, it's quite difficult for me to think of behaviors that are as critical as communication behaviors. So if we look at communication behaviors through the lens of adaptability in the AI age, what do you see?
Yeah, great question. I love that culture eats strategy for lunch. I mean, we are seeing that happen right now with Nike, with the new hire that they just made, someone who's been there for a long time. They were having really low engagement, low morale. Separate conversation there, but just great point on what you were saying. So you were saying, what are the communication behaviors that we need in order to have cultural transformation? Well, we need to be able to, especially if we are leaders, be curious, be able to ask questions and understand what's going on the ground floor for our employees. Where are they? Are they afraid? Where are they getting stuck? Where are their challenges? We need to be open and curious. So we need to be asking questions, not just dictating what we want to have happen. So we need to have this ability to look down. The higher up we get in a leadership role, the less we know what it's actually like to be on the ground floor. And so it's really important, because as leaders, so often I see leaders give an incredible solution, but it's actually to the wrong problem. So what does it do us any good? And that's because they didn't ask the right questions. So the very first skill of great communication, especially when you're trying to build cultural transformation, is making sure you're solving the right problems. You're not just throwing AI at a wall and just being like, let's use it for that. Let's use it for that. But like, what's actually the thing that's going to be most useful for your employees to use it for? Let's get curious. Where are they getting stuck when they're starting to use it? And so curiosity and being able to ask great questions is the first really key skill. Now that I could go on for the rest of this time on all the other skills, but I want to make sure that the other panelists have an opportunity to share some of the other communication skills and behaviors too.
I love this call out for curiosity. And one of the things I say when I work with people is be curious, not furious. And, just hold the judgment for a little while longer. Thank you. Alex.
Yeah, so something that came to mind with that, right? And what Jess is speaking to is absolutely that psychological safety, right? Like that's kind of a cornerstone of it, is being open to new ideas, being able to foster that conversation. And with that, the systems need to support that. I would say too, I've also worked at organizations where, or worked with, where the leaders seem to think that, no conflict means psychological safety. Like not in a, they're suppressing conflict, but actually like, oh, we're just all cordial with each other, and therefore we have psychological safety. And that's also not kind of the right lens. And I think part of it does land in how we're hiring, right? Are we, one of the things I always do with organizations is we ban the phrase culture fit. Culture fit is often used to really exacerbate similarity bias, affinity bias, all of those things that kind of give that homogenous mindset. You do want to make sure that you're hiring for cultural enhancement. You're hiring people who are going to challenge your ideas, right? So even kind of starting from that side of it, and then within the workplace, then you're also fostering that in every meeting. And you're actually putting in parameters to make sure that there is that open space for that dialogue. And then on top of that, you're giving people a heads up about what you're going to talk about in that meeting. So people who process things a little bit differently, have some time to think about it ahead of time. So those things that come to mind related to those communication behaviors. And I think that at the end of the day, like, yes, communication is a key skill for any leader. But no matter how good the communication skills are, if the systems don't support the type of communication that you want, the cascading of communication that you want, and if you're not doing the work to make sure that everyone's on the same page, while also kind of fostering conflict management versus resolution, staying true to the goal and making sure everyone understands the goal in the same way, everyone's articulating it in the same way. That's really the only way to be successful, with those communication styles.
And I think just to add on to that, if you come back to adaptability, I can see in the comments culture add, not culture fit type of thing. And I like to talk about cultural fitness, because I think that's exactly what we're doing. And a massive leadership skill for me in communication and other things is understanding that we're communicating across boundaries. Now that can be national boundaries, cultural boundaries, neurodiversity boundaries. People will react very different to our communication, and we need to be able to adapt our message so that it's received in any way. And I think with the onset of social media and WhatsApp, and I watch my nieces and nephews, they're in the same room, they're WhatsApping each other. Wow. Okay. And it's a generational difference. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's really, really different. So I think organizations have to have fitness in terms of how they can adapt and grow the muscles or hone the muscles of the system. That means that communication remains as effective as possible. Clearly, individual as a leader, but also constantly checking how it's received, my message. Not just, oh, I've done my presentation, tick. And I think that's more important when there's so much technology, because the emotional part of that connection is really important.
It always makes me so happy when people are in favor of culture ed. One of the statements I never really vibed with is great minds think alike. Great minds think differently and they expand each other. And Sudhir, I started speaking just as you unmuted yourself, so thank you for giving me a few seconds. Please.
That's okay, Minola, and you always bring in these gems, so you are most welcome to speak whenever you want. Yeah, I think all that has been said is absolutely important, and no doubt about it. I think one of the things that I am seeing our leaders are not becoming better at is empathy and being in touch. So while there's a lot of talk about emotional intelligence and empathy and so on, actually this entire um, series of events have actually increased that gap. And I think if we are talking about reskilling and upskilling, I think we need to do that for our leaders to a great extent, right? So we need to really upskill them when it comes to empathy and ability to have that dialogue and not just like push their decision, right? So it's important from an executive position to be able to have that clarity and be able to come up with some solutions, which might be difficult for the others. But as I think Jess rightly pointed out, without understanding what the real issues are at the ground floor, most of the times they are a misfire. So understanding that is very, very important. Um, Listening to people has become restricted to just the engagement survey nowadays. I again might sound very aged, but like in our times, leaders used to spend a lot of time personally interacting with us. And now I see the leaders really looking at those reports, looking at the comments, and not making any efforts to go beyond those, right? So I think that also needs to be looked at. And our leaders travel a lot, like they are in various parts of the world to meet the customers and investors, but they mostly forget the employees, that in the same town there are these employees who now don't work in any offices, they work remote, but they could all be invited to a dinner maybe, and that could be a great opportunity to interact with them, know from them what their life looks like, and also share with them what's happening at the higher levels.
I love that point about having dinner together. There's so much evidence that, I mean, we know this, right? Breaking bread is really powerful. And you talk about that in your book, Manola. Just a couple of things to build on. I love everything people are talking about in terms of communication. One of the things I really, really love is the idea of intellectual humility. And I think that goes along with curiosity and empathy. And so a really big part of communication is asking questions, listening, being present, really being open and knowing none of us has all the answers. And there's kind of a fundamental humility that is our assumption that other people have something to share that will benefit us and benefit our understanding and benefit our perspectives. And balancing that, I think, is professional courage, right? Like, how can we be self-aware? How can we kind of stand firm? How can we hold people accountable? How can we express with confidence our point of view and be open at the same time? And so I think that authenticity and transparency are also really, really important for communication. We tend to trust people who are legible, people that are easier to read. And so I think that goes along with great communication as well. So intellectual humility, professional courage, and then also just repetition, right? Like we need to be planfully redundant, intentionally redundant about the messages that we're sending. I used to work with a leader and he said, if I'm not completely tired of hearing myself say it by the end of the day, I may not have said it enough. So I think it's a point worth mentioning and maybe mentioning again. Haha.
Sudhir, yes, please.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to quickly react to Erin Bresser's comment here, if they have time. And this is such an interesting observation, I always believe the leaders are supposed to spend all their time building teams and growing their people, and then let their people do all the stuff. And what's happening nowadays is the leaders are trying to do everything themselves. They have to possibly, shoulder all the burden themselves, and that is creating all the issues. So leaders always have all the time. It's the question of prioritization.
Thank you, Sudhir, for picking that one up. And we are 10 minutes away from wrapping this up, and I am so frustrated by this. I feel like we could go on for at least 2 more hours. And okay, maybe the last question. I will use inspiration from one of the people in the audience. I just want to make sure that I get the name correctly. So Mikkel Theo, I believe, and I apologize for the Starbucks moment and mispronouncing your name. How can leadership ensure teams feel empowered rather than threatened by AI integration? Creating a culture where adaptability is rewarded seems key. What strategies have worked for others? And I would just slightly reframe the question in the sense that we've given people so many things to be curious about. Now, when we wrap up this panel, where can they start? How can they go back in the organization? And I don't want to make the assumption that everybody watching or listening to us is from HR. I would be very happy to hear what other functions you represent in the audience today. So how can they take the inspiration and the energy from this conversation and turning it into something actionable almost right away? And Alex, you were so patient and you never got the chance to be a pioneer in a round of answers. So now is your moment.
Well, lucky me. Okay, so yes, very tangible actions, no matter your level. I think, so if you don't have any supervisory, if you are more of, any of the entry or above, or just, don't have the supervisory capacity, right? I think it is actually exploring, doing a bit of research on your own, figuring out what it might mean for your job, talking to your manager about it, asking about it. Trying to be ahead of the curve a little bit, and then talking to other people in the organization about what this means, right? So when I think about that particular piece of it, now adaptability, what's interesting is if anyone's familiar with StrengthsFinder, if adaptability is one of the strengths identified, I happen to have it in my top strengths, but not everyone does. And it doesn't mean that you suddenly need to be the most adaptable person. I think any organization should have parameters around what adaptability means for us. But as long as you commit to learning, I think that's a big piece of it. Now, for manager level, starting to think about how might you revise job descriptions for your team based upon where you're trying to go with technology. So really kind of thinking about what are clear roles and responsibilities that I can communicate to folks that makes them feel more empowered, less threatened. They know what they're working towards, and working with them to figure out what is the learning that they need in order to get there, and making sure that it's a co-collaborative conversation, right? That you're including your team in those conversations. Then I think at the leadership level, it's getting clear yourself on the vision, right? And making sure the leadership team is all clear on where they're heading towards. And everyone here had amazing points about communication. So take all the great nuggets that came from this, right? About like, here's how, you should think about communication, and all leadership is change leadership. So if you don't already have the capabilities around leading change, make sure that you have that, the pillars of communication, engagement, and training. And then work with your HR teams, your IT teams, any of those operational teams to make sure that your systems support where you're trying to go.
Yeah, and I think if I build on that, as a leader, I would be looking to do what I call a litmus test of my team. So I'd be looking at them and thinking, okay, we know what we need to be adaptable. We know what skills we need emotionally on the human level and technologically with AI. Where do I have gaps? And what conversations do we need to have as a team? Because if I come back to the systemic view, the organizational processes reward and recognize certain things. And I'm coming to the second part of that, creating a culture where adaptability is rewarded. This whole discussion around performance management, individual objectives, collective objectives, is the system going to reward what we say we want? And if I'm a leader, that's a strategic conversation that I will have with HR, of course, but also with my team. Because if the system is still rewarding individual behaviors, which is normal because that's the system that's in place, how could we pilot having a collective objective? And what can we notice, if I come back to a curiosity, what can we furiously notice about how we're adapting and what that means for the way we communicate or the way we collaborate? So I think there's lots of little experiments that you can do as a leader to start finding out what works for your team, and if I scale it, what may work for the organization in terms of the culture you need to create, and that will be empowering in itself to contribute to that.
I actually just did an article on how to lead through change when you lack confidence. There's some new data that lots and lots and lots of leaders are expecting change and transformation, and the vast majority are not confident in their own abilities or their organizational abilities. So how do you lead when it's so uncertain? It's Forbes, Brower, Change Management. You'll find it if you're interested in that data. But also, I think in terms of pragmatically, what can we do right away? One of the things that has been really helpful with a couple of clients that I've worked with is being really clear about what's changing and what's not. We're not changing our values. We're not changing our market niche. We're not changing our expectation for XYZ, right? We are changing maybe certain ways the work gets done, or we're going to be updating our processes, whatever those are specific to departments or to the organization. So being really clear what's changing, what's not. Another thing, and this harkens to you, Susie, is pilot. I think a lot of times we believe, we have to do AI in our organizations, or we have to do tech in our organizations. But we're very, very wise to pick some areas where we can pilot, monitor, measure, learn, continuously improve, and then scale as appropriate. And thirdly, I think we need to clarify guardrails. In what ways should people be using AI? In what ways do we need them to be careful? What are the things that we don't enter in a chat GPT system? In what ways do we bring in vendors who can help us with some augmented systems? Those guardrails will keep us safe as an organization, and they will help provide clarity to employees. So 3 ideas from me.
I can just jump right in since we don't have a lot of time left. But amazing things that have been said so far. So I work a lot with leaders on teaching them how to communicate with influence. I have a 7-part strategy for how to get buy-in. A lot of things that have been, named so far that are really important that I'll kind of go through quickly, and then I'll double down on the thing that I think we've missed so far that, is just one additional ad. Listening tour, making sure that we're understanding what's going on the ground floor. Clarifying, why are we doing this? What's the bigger picture? Getting everyone on board on the bigger picture. How are they going to be, possible for it? Making sure that they feel safe. And, telling a story, what's the story of how we are going to, as an organization, shift and change, getting people to feel like it's something bigger than themselves, that they're part of something that's beautiful. And then empowering execution. And this is where I think sometimes we miss. We talked about the upskilling, but we also didn't talk at all about empowering employees to feel like they're part of the process once it's happened, once the decision is made, allowing them to own even micro decisions as they continue to move along so that they can feel like they're part of it. So most of the time, a lot of organizations, it sits very heavy at the top where all decisions, everyone waits for the CEO. And if you can break down some of those decisions into things that are smaller pieces and allow employees to own some parts of the process in this cultural transformation, they're going to feel more excited, more bought in to the process.
We will overrun by a couple of minutes, so I just wanted to be able to say thank you to Susie. I know you have a hard stop, so thank you for being here, and please feel free to drop off whenever you need to go. And Sudhir.
Yeah, I just wanted to say yes, 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 yes to everything that has been said. Only thing that I would add as a very clear action item that we could take from here is giving the steering wheel to people after all the education and psychological safety, all that stuff has been done, and ask them to job craft their roles, So ask them, okay, what could your job look like 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, a year down the line, 3 years down the line, and give them the onus to then figure out what kind of reskilling and upskilling that might be required with all the support in place.
Yeah. Thank you very much for being here. I promise I will only take half a minute more because I do want to ask this question. If I don't ask this question, I will regret it forever. When you hear fostering a culture of adaptability in the AI age, what is the first word that pops in your mind when you hear this? So, fostering a culture of adaptability in the AI age. One word, anything goes. And we will do it as we started. Tracy.
Empowerment.
Sudhir.
Empathy.
Jess.
Communication.
And Alex.
Oh boy. Design. So really thinking through all aspects. Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you all very, very much. Thank you everybody in the audience for being here today. Please stay tuned and follow more conversation from our October series. And Jessa, thank you for taking care of us. And I hope I will get to welcome you to many more conversations in the future. Thank you, Tracy, Sudhir, Jess, and Alex. A joy and a privilege as always. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Manola.